The Bitcoin Standard, the Decentralized Alternative to Central Banking, by Saifedean Ammous. Picture a tiny island lost in the endless Pacific Ocean, a speck called Yap. For hundreds of years, the people there used a form of money so strange it would make your head spin. Forget gold, silver, or paper. We're talking about stone. But here's the thing. These weren't just any stones. Imagine circular limestone discs so massive they could rival your car, each with a hole carved through the center. The locals called them rye stones. And get this, these stones didn't even come from Yap. Someone had to sail hundreds of miles to another island, carve them out by hand, and somehow drag them back on rickety canoes and rafts. Men died making this journey. That's how valuable these stones were. When a stone finally made it to Yap, it got dropped in a public spot where everyone could admire it. And here's where it gets weird. The stone almost never moved again. When someone wanted to make a major payment, like for their daughter's wedding, they didn't actually roll the giant stone to the new owner's place. Instead, the owner would just announce to the whole village, "Hey everyone, this stone belongs to that family now." And because everyone on the island knew the complete history of every single stone, the ownership just transferred in their minds. The stone's value held firm because everyone knew it was rare, and creating a new one meant risking your life. This beautifully simple system worked for centuries. It was rock-solid money, literally. Then, one day in 1871, fate intervened. An Irish-American sailor named David O'Keefe washed up on shore after a shipwreck. While he recovered, his entrepreneurial mind was racing. He wanted to buy coconuts from the islanders, but they couldn't care less about his foreign currency. They had their stones, thank you very much. O'Keefe saw his opening. He sailed to the quarry island, but he didn't mess around with canoes. He showed up with a massive ship, modern tools, and, here's the kicker, explosives. He started blasting limestone out of the ground, churning out new rye stones with ridiculous ease. Then he sailed back to Yap and tried to buy coconuts with his factory-fresh stones. At first, the village chief saw right through it. He got it immediately. He declared these new stones worthless because they came too easily. They lacked the story, the sacrifice, the blood and sweat that made the real ones valuable. But eventually, human nature kicked in. Some islanders caved. They accepted the cheap stones. And in that single moment, the monetary system that had anchored their society for centuries started crumbling. Their money, once incredibly hard to produce, had become laughably easy. An outsider who figured out how to game their system quietly drained away the wealth of their entire society. That story from Yap? It's actually the story of all money throughout human history. It's about a hidden force that's built empires and torn them down, a force that determines whether we're motivated to save for tomorrow or blow everything today, whether societies flourish in peace or tear themselves apart in chaos and war. And it's the beating heart of a book that's quietly becoming one of the most important of our generation, The Bitcoin Standard, by Saifedean Ammous. This isn't just another book hyping some digital currency. It's a wild ride through thousands of years of human history, peeling back the layers to reveal what money actually is. By the time we're done here today, you're going to understand a secret that shaped empires, fueled wars, and sealed the fate of nations. You'll start seeing money not as those green bills in your wallet, but as a technology, one that can either lift civilization up or drag it into the dirt. And you'll get why a mysterious digital invention, created by someone who never even revealed their real name, might just be the most revolutionary breakthrough since we invented the internet. So get comfortable, we've got quite a story ahead of us. If you really want to understand how the world works, you've got to understand money. Not just how to make it or spend it, but what it fundamentally is. Most of us cruise through life, never asking that basic question. We treat it like gravity, just something that exists. But money isn't a law of physics. It's a tool humans invented. And like any tool, it can work beautifully or fail spectacularly. Our story starts with a simple problem our ancestors faced. Imagine a world without money. We call this barter, and it sounds simple until you actually try to make it work. You're a fisherman who wants bread. You need to find a baker who wants fish. That's doable. But what if the baker doesn't want fish today? What if you're trying to buy a house, but all you've got are shoes? You can't exactly pay the homeowner one shoe at a time over 30 years. And what if you grow apples that rot in a week, but you're saving up for a car? Your wealth would literally decompose before you could accumulate enough. Economists have this fancy term, the problem of the coincidence of wants. It's a problem that stretches across scales, across time, and across space. Early humans stumbled onto a genius solution: indirect exchange. Instead of trading your fish straight to the baker for bread, you trade your fish for something you know the baker will want. Maybe it's a handful of shiny seashells. You don't personally want the seashells, but you accept them because you know other people will accept them from you later. That intermediary thing you buy not to use, but to trade again, that's where money begins. Over thousands of years, humans have tried using everything as money. Seashells, gorgeous glass beads in Africa, salt, cattle, even cigarettes in prisons. There's no objectively right choice. But there are consequences. And history shows us, with brutal honesty, that societies that picked the best form of money were the ones that thrived. So what makes money good? Saifedean Ammous argues it all comes down to one critical quality: salability. How easily can you sell this thing at any time without it losing much value? And salability has three dimensions that mirror those barter problems. First, salability across scales. Good money needs to divide easily into small units and combine into large ones. Try making change with a cow. Gold, though? You can slice it into tiny grams or stack it into massive bars. Second, salability across space. Good money needs to travel well. This is why things with high value-to-weight ratios, like precious metals, beat out stuff like salt or those giant yapstones. But the third dimension? This is where the real drama unfolds. Salability across time. This is what we call store of value. For something to work as good money, it has to reliably hold its worth far into the future. And this is where history gets really interesting. To hold value, money can't rot like an apple. But that's not enough. It also has to be difficult to produce more of. If its supply can balloon easily, its value will inevitably crash. This brings us to the most powerful concept in the whole book: the stock-to-flow ratio. It sounds technical, but it's beautifully elegant. The stock is the total amount of something that exists right now. The flow is how much new stuff gets produced each year. A high stock-to-flow ratio means the existing pile is massive compared to the new annual production. Think about gold. Humans have been accumulating gold for millennia. Virtually all the gold ever dug up still exists somewhere. The new amount mined each year, the flow, is just a tiny trickle, roughly 1.5%, compared to the enormous reservoir of existing gold, the stock. This is what makes gold hard money. Even if gold's price doubled tomorrow, miners couldn't suddenly triple their output. The supply is stubborn. Now think about copper or oil. The existing stockpiles are tiny compared to annual production and consumption. If copper's price shoots up, producers can crank up production dramatically, flooding the market and crushing the price back down. This is easy money. And this leads to what Ammous calls the easy money trap. It's almost a law of nature. Anything people start using to store value will see its supply increase as producers rush to make more of it. And anything whose supply balloons easily will destroy the wealth of everyone using it to store value. This is exactly what happened to the Yapese when O'Keefe showed up with his explosives. It's what happened in West Africa, where precious agri beads, rare for centuries, served as money. When European traders arrived in the 1500s, they realized they could manufacture identical beads back home for pennies. They flooded Africa with these cheap knockoffs, trading them for precious resources like gold, ivory, and tragically even enslaved people. The Africans holding their wealth in beads watched its value evaporate. Their hard money got transformed into easy money by a technological shock, and their wealth systematically transferred to those who could produce the money cheaply. This story repeats throughout history like a dark refrain. The choice between hard money and easy money isn't merely financial, it's civilizational. Societies built on hard money, money that's difficult to produce, are forced to become productive. The only way to get money is creating real value for others. But societies falling into the easy money trap grow poorer, as people's efforts get diverted from creating actual wealth to the fool's errand of creating more money. As humans got better at metallurgy, they discovered metals made far superior money. They lasted forever, could be divided easily, and traveled well. But not all metals are equal. Iron and copper were too common and rusted easily. Their stock-to-flow ratio was low. They were easy money. But two metals stood apart: silver and especially gold. Gold is chemically stable, virtually indestructible. Almost all the gold ever mined still exists somewhere today, and it's incredibly rare in Earth's crust. This combination gives it the highest stock-to-flow ratio of any physical commodity, a property it's maintained for thousands of years. This is why, through centuries of market competition, gold emerged as the ultimate form of money, the universal store of value for civilizations everywhere. The story of civilization is deeply tangled up with the story of sound money, and no story illustrates this better than Rome's rise and fall. During the height of the Roman Republic and early empire, Rome thrived on sound money. The aureus coin, introduced by Julius Caesar, contained about 8 grams of pure gold. It was accepted across the known world, creating history's largest free trade zone. This economic stability, built on hard money's foundation, allowed unprecedented flourishing of trade, specialization, and prosperity. Then came the infamous Emperor Nero. Faced with extravagant spending and a bloated military, he found a clever solution. He began, quote, coin clipping. He'd recall existing coins, melt them down, and remint them with a little less gold or silver mixed with cheaper metals. He could produce more coins from the same precious metal, using the extra coins to finance his spending sprees. At first, it seemed like magic, free money. But it was the beginning of the end. This debasement was a hidden tax on everyone holding Roman currency. It was the first step into the easy money trap. As emperor after emperor followed Nero's playbook, the gold and silver content dwindled. By Diocletian's reign, the silver denarius was just bronze, with a thin silver coating that wore off quickly. What were the consequences of this slow-motion monetary collapse. Catastrophic. As the money became unreliable, people's trust evaporated. Speculation became more profitable than production. Why bother building a business or farming when the money you earn will be worthless tomorrow? Economic production ground to a halt. The vast division of labor across the empire crumbled. The great Roman cities, once bustling commerce centers, couldn't sustain themselves on trade anymore. People fled to the countryside, seeking self-sufficiency. The sophisticated Roman citizen devolved into a feudal serf. Historian Ferdinand Lips wrote, "With money so unreliable and debased, speculation in commodities became far more attractive than producing them." Rome didn't fall solely because of barbarian invasions. It rotted from within, and the decay started with its money. But while the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the eastern half, Byzantium, experienced something completely different. In 312 AD, Emperor Constantine the Great committed to a new sound currency, the solitis, containing 4.5 grams of pure gold, and for over 1,000 years, his successors maintained its integrity without debasement. This coin, later called the bezant, became the world's most trusted currency. While Rome burned, Constantinople, Byzantium's capital, flourished. It became a beacon of stability, art, and commerce in a dark world. Its strength stood on sound money's bedrock. And like Rome, its eventual decline only began when rulers, centuries later, started devaluing the currency. The lesson rings clear. Sound money is civilization's foundation. Unsound money is its catalyst for collapse. After Rome's fall, Europe descended into the Dark Ages. Intricate trade networks vanished. Society became fragmented, poor, and isolated. The money available to common people was mostly debased copper and silver coins, terrible stores of value that discouraged saving and long-term thinking. So what pulled Europe out of this darkness? Once again, sound money. It started in Italy's free city-states. In 1252, Florence minted the florin, the first major sound gold coinage in Europe since Caesar's time. Soon after, Venice issued the ducat. These reliable, hard currencies became Europe's prime medium of exchange. They enabled the re-emergence of large-scale trade, banking, and capital accumulation. And with that economic liberation came the explosion of culture, art, and science we call the Renaissance. It's no coincidence that history's greatest artistic flourishing was financed by wealthy patrons in Florence and Venice, patrons who'd grown rich and could think long-term because they held their wealth in sound money. This brings us to one of the book's most profound ideas, the connection between money's soundness and our time preference. Time preference is simply how much you value now versus later. We all have positive time preference. We'd rather have pizza today than the same pizza next year. The future's uncertain. But our degree of time preference varies wildly. Someone with high time preference is very present-focused. They want instant gratification. Think of a kid who can't resist eating one marshmallow now, even when promised 2 marshmallows for waiting 15 minutes. Someone with low time preference is future-oriented. They'll delay gratification for a bigger reward later. They're the kid who waits for the second marshmallow. This isn't just personality, it's the essence of human progress. As humans lower their time preference, they stop focusing only on immediate survival and start saving and investing. They take time away from hunting barehanded to build a fishing rod. The fishing rod is capital. It can't be eaten, but it makes future production more efficient. This is civilization's process, delaying gratification to accumulate capital, which makes our labor more productive, which improves life quality, which lets us think even further ahead. It's a virtuous cycle. A low time preference society builds cathedrals, invests in science, and creates timeless art. A high time preference society accumulates debt and consumes itself into oblivion. And what's one of the most powerful factors shaping society's time preference? The nature of its money. If you live with sound money, money that holds or increases value over time, you're rewarded for saving. Delaying consumption is smart. This encourages low time preference, not just financially, but in all life aspects. You become more likely to invest in education, health, family, and moral character. But if you live with unsound money, money constantly losing value to inflation, saving becomes foolish. Money you save today buys less tomorrow. The system punishes delayed consumption. It encourages spending money as fast as you get it, or better yet, going into debt. This fosters high time preference. The future becomes a discounted blur. Life becomes chasing short-term pleasures while ignoring long-term consequences. This is the last century's hidden story. The late 1800s was the Belle Epoque, the beautiful era. It was the classical gold standard's golden age. For roughly 4 decades, from 1871 to 1914, most of the industrialized world shared a single sound monetary standard: gold. Different national currencies, the British pound, French franc, German mark, were just different names for specific gold weights. Exchange rates were fixed and predictable. It was a time of unprecedented global trade, capital accumulation, and technological innovation. Inventions defining our modern world: electricity, the internal combustion engine, automobiles, airplanes, telephones, all emerged in this era of hard money and low time preference. It was relatively peaceful, with incredible personal freedom. Governments stayed small and fiscally responsible because they couldn't just print money to finance their ambitions. They had to tax citizens, placing natural limits on their power. So what happened? What brought this beautiful era to a catastrophic end? World War I. In 1914, as Europe's great powers prepared for war, they faced a problem. A war fought on the gold standard would be short, because governments would quickly run out of gold to pay soldiers and buy weapons. So one by one, they did something unthinkable. They suspended the gold standard. They told citizens their paper money was no longer redeemable for gold. They severed the anchor. With hard money's discipline gone, governments could now finance war simply by firing up printing presses. The war was no longer limited by taxes they could collect, but by how much they could destroy their people's savings through inflation. This is why a conflict everyone expected to end in months dragged on for 4 bloody years, consuming a generation's wealth and lives. The gold standard's suspension in 1914 wasn't just a temporary wartime measure. It was a new era's beginning, the century of government money. The world would never recover. Money was no longer a market-chosen good, but a state-controlled token. Hayek called this monetary nationalism. Each country now had its own floating fiat currency, its value manipulated by a central bank. The consequences, devastated. The 1920s saw hyperinflation in Germany, wiping out middle-class savings and paving the way for Nazism's rise. Attempting to prop up an overvalued British pound, central banks, led by the newly created Federal Reserve, engaged in monetary expansion that created a massive stock market bubble. We all know what happened next: the 1929 crash and the Great Depression. The official story taught in schools claims the Depression was capitalism's failure, and the gold standard made it worse. This book argues that's exactly backwards. The depression was caused not by the gold standard, but by moving away from it. By the 1920s central bank inflation that created the artificial boom. The recession was the inevitable bust. The government's response, under both Hoover and FDR, doubled down on the problem. Instead of letting prices and wages adjust, they tried propping them up with price controls, massive government spending, and further monetary manipulation. They prolonged the agony for over a decade. And their solution? Blame the last remnant of sound money. In 1933, President Roosevelt issued an executive order making it illegal for Americans to own gold. The government confiscated its people's savings, then immediately devalued the dollar against gold by 41%. The age of fiat money had truly arrived. This new monetary system needed a new ideology to justify it, and it found one in John Maynard Keynes's work. Keynesian economics flipped centuries of economic wisdom upside down. It taught that saving was a vice and spending a virtue. It claimed recessions were caused by mysterious flagging, quote, animal spirits. And the solution was government stepping in to spend more money it could create from thin air. As Keynes famously said, perfectly defending high time preference thinking, in the long run we are all dead. His ideas provided perfect intellectual cover for politicians wanting to promise voters a free lunch. This system, a world of floating fiat currencies managed by central banks mandated to inflate, is what we live in today. It's led to a century of perpetual war, as governments can finance conflict without directly taxing citizens. It's created the boom and bust cycle of the modern economy. The Austrian School of Economics, sidelined by the Keynesian Revolution, had a clear explanation. It's called Austrian business cycle theory. Simply put, when a central bank artificially lowers interest rates, the price of borrowing money, it sends a false signal to the economy. It's like a contractor told he has enough bricks for 120 houses, when he really only has enough for 100. He starts all 120 projects, but halfway through realizes he's running out of bricks. He has to abandon unfinished houses. These unfinished projects are malinvestments. Their widespread simultaneous failure is the recession. The boom was illusion. The bust is painful return to reality. Recessions aren't capitalism's failure. They're the inevitable result of government intervention in the money market. This government money system also turned international trade into a battlefield. Countries now try devaluing their currencies to make exports cheaper, engaging in, quote, currency wars that impoverish their own citizens to benefit a few politically connected industries. The foreign exchange market, where traders bet on these fluctuations, is now about 25 times larger than the entire planet's GDP. That's a staggering amount of human talent and capital wasted on a zero-sum game that only exists because we abandoned single global sound money. For decades, this seemed like the end of history. Humanity appeared trapped in a system of ever-depreciating government money, encouraging debt, consumerism, and expanding state power. As economist Friedrich Hayek said in 1984, "I don't believe we shall ever have good money again before we take the thing out of government hands. All we can do is by some sly roundabout way introduce something they can't stop." He had no clue how prophetic those words would prove. 24 years later, amid the 2008 global financial crisis, a crisis born from the very central banking system we've been discussing, an anonymous programmer calling himself Satoshi Nakamoto sent an email to a small cryptography mailing list. The subject line read, "Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system." He'd created something the world had never seen. He'd solved the digital money problem. So what is Bitcoin? It's widely misunderstood. To grasp its importance, we need to see it not just as new payment technology, but as a new form of money, measured against the properties we've discussed. First, Bitcoin is digital cash. Before Bitcoin, all digital payments required a trusted third party, a bank, credit card company, PayPal. This was because of the double spending problem. If you have a digital file, like an MP3, you can copy it infinitely. If digital money were just a file, you could spend it repeatedly. To prevent this, you needed a central authority keeping a ledger and verifying you only spent your money once. Satoshi's genius was creating a system solving the double spending problem without any central authority. He did it by creating a public ledger shared and verified by a global network of computers. This ledger is the blockchain. When you send Bitcoin, the transaction broadcasts to the entire network. Computers on the network, called miners, compete to verify a batch of transactions and add them to the ledger in a, quote, block. To do this, they must solve an incredibly difficult mathematical puzzle. This process is proof of work. Think of it as a competition. The first miner solving the puzzle gets to add the next block to the chain and is rewarded with brand new Bitcoins. This proof of work is essential. It makes adding transactions to the ledger computationally expensive, meaning it's prohibitively expensive for anyone to cheat. To alter a past transaction, you'd need to redo all the work done since, plus work on the current block, while competing with the entire honest network. It's practically impossible. Bitcoin is a system built on 100% verification and zero trust. It's like Yap's rye stones, where the ledger lived in the entire village's collective mind. But now, the village is the entire world. But being digital cash is only half the story. The truly revolutionary part is that Bitcoin is hard money. In fact, it's the hardest money ever invented. Remember our stock-to-flow ratio. Gold is hard money because its new supply flow is tiny compared to existing supply stock. Bitcoin was designed with perfectly predictable finite supply. The code dictates new Bitcoins are created with each new block, but the reward gets cut in half roughly every 4 years. This is the halving. The total number of Bitcoins that will ever exist is capped at 21 million. But here's the magic ingredient making it harder than gold: the difficulty adjustment. As Bitcoin's price rises, more people are incentivized to mine it, bringing more computing power to the network. Normally, this would mean new coins are found faster, increasing supply. But the Bitcoin protocol automatically senses this power increase and makes the mathematical puzzle harder to solve. This ensures new blocks are always found, on average, every 10 minutes. Think about what this means. With gold, if the price skyrockets, more resources eventually lead to more gold production. With Bitcoin, no matter how high the price goes, no matter how many trillions get thrown at mining it, new Bitcoin supply cannot increase. The extra energy and computing power only make the network more secure. Growth in its value cannot increase its supply. It's the first time in human history we have an asset with this property. It's the first example of absolute scarcity. Its stock-to-flow ratio is programmed to increase every 4 years, eventually overtaking gold's, and ultimately, around 2140, becoming infinite when the last Bitcoin is mined. Finally, Bitcoin is sovereign money. This might be hardest to grasp, but it's most important. Nobody controls Bitcoin. It's open source. Anyone can copy the code and suggest changes. But for a change to be adopted, the vast majority of users running the software worldwide have to accept it. The system's incentives create incredibly strong bias toward the status quo. Miners won't mine blocks. Users won't accept, because they won't get paid. Users won't adopt changes threatening the network's core properties, especially the 21 million supply cap, because that's the source of its value. This has been tested. Over the years, powerful groups of developers and large companies have tried forcing changes to Bitcoin's core rules, particularly to increase transaction capacity. Every single attempt has failed. They couldn't convince the decentralized network of users to follow them. All they managed was creating copies or forks, like Bitcoin Cash, which have struggled to gain traction and value. This demonstrates Bitcoin's incredible resilience, what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility. Attacks don't just fail to kill it, they make it stronger. Every failed attempt to change it, every government ban it survives, every obituary written that proves false, only serves as more powerful advertisement for its robustness. It proves the rules are truly immutable. So what's Bitcoin good for? Based on its properties, its primary use case is store of value. It's a liquid asset with guaranteed scarce supply, making it ideal for protecting wealth from inflation's silent theft. For people living under oppressive regimes or in countries with collapsing currencies, Bitcoin isn't speculation. It's a lifeboat. Its second major use case is sovereign, censorship-resistant money. It lets anyone send value anywhere without needing permission from banks or governments. This gives individuals economic freedom that wasn't possible before. It's peaceful, defensive technology, making it extremely expensive for anyone, including the state, to confiscate wealth. But what about buying coffee? This is a common misunderstanding. Bitcoin, in its current form, isn't designed as a high-volume payment system for small, everyday transactions. On-chain transactions are too slow, and, as the network gets popular, too expensive for that. Trying to use the Bitcoin blockchain for every world transaction would be like trying to settle every credit card swipe with physical gold bars. Instead, Bitcoin is evolving into a final settlement layer. It's like gold reserves held by central banks. Small everyday transactions will likely happen on second layers built on top of Bitcoin, systems that are faster and cheaper, but ultimately settle their final balances on the secure, immutable main blockchain. And what about common criticisms? Isn't Bitcoin mining an energy waste? The energy gives the network its security and makes its monetary properties credible. It's the cost of having a decentralized, trustless system. Compare it to enormous resources consumed by the traditional financial system, the skyscrapers, servers, business-class flights, and more importantly, the cost of the military-industrial complex required to back a fiat reserve currency like the US dollar. Bitcoin's energy use starts looking remarkably efficient. Is it just for criminals? Any money can be used for illicit purposes, but Bitcoin's public permanent ledger actually makes it a poor choice for most crimes. Once an address links to a real identity, every transaction that address ever made is visible to the world forever. Cash is far more anonymous. Can't it be hacked or shut down? The Bitcoin network itself has never been hacked. Exchanges and individual wallets have been, but that's like saying the dollar is insecure because a bank got robbed. The protocol itself has operated without interruption for over a decade, withstanding countless attacks. And because it's a decentralized network with no central point of failure, there's no off switch. To kill it, you'd have to shut down the entire global internet. The rise of thousands of other cryptocurrencies, or altcoins, doesn't threaten Bitcoin. In fact, it highlights its uniqueness. These other projects are almost all centrally controlled by their founders and development teams. They can, and do, change their rules. They lack the spontaneous, decentralized, truly immutable nature that makes Bitcoin valuable. They are, in essence, a return to the easy money trap in new digital form. Ultimately, Bitcoin is a profound technological and economic experiment. Its success isn't guaranteed, but it represents a choice. For the first time in over a century, we have a viable alternative to government-controlled money. It's a return to sound money principles, but in new, digital form native to our globalized world. The journey through the Bitcoin standard is powerful. It forces us to see the world through a new lens. It reveals that our money's quality isn't trivial matter for economists to debate. It shapes our society's very fabric and our lives' character. The most powerful lesson for me is time preference. Sound money, by rewarding saving and future thinking, builds not just wealth but civilization. It encourages the long-term perspective, leading to great art, scientific breakthroughs, and strong families. Unsound money, by contrast, throws us into a perpetual present, a frantic race of consumption and debt eroding our capital, both financial and moral. This isn't just abstract theory about history, it's deeply personal. When you understand time preference, you see it everywhere. You see it in your decision to study tonight instead of procrastinating, to save part of your paycheck instead of spending it all, to choose long-term fulfillment over short-term pleasure. Bitcoin, in this sense, is more than technology. It's a philosophical statement. It's a vote for a world with lower time preference. So how can we apply these profound lessons in our own lives, starting today? First, simply observe your own time preference. For the next week, just notice the small trade-offs you make between your present and future self. Do you hit snooze, stealing productive morning moments for comfort? Do you choose easy, processed food over healthier meals requiring more effort? No need for judgment, just awareness. This simple observation is the first step toward making more conscious choices. Second, question the narrative of free. We live in a world constantly told governments can provide free education, free healthcare, and solutions to all problems. Next time you hear a politician make such promises, or claim, debt doesn't matter because we owe it to ourselves, ask the question this book teaches. Who's really paying for this? How is my savings, value, and my future earnings affected by inflation's hidden tax? Finally, explore the rabbit hole. This book opens a door to a completely different worldview. You don't have to buy Bitcoin or become an expert overnight. Start small. Learn about the Austrian School of Economics. Read the original 9-page white paper Satoshi Nakamoto wrote. It's elegant, clear, and will give you deeper appreciation for his invention's beauty. The Bitcoin Standard is more than a book about currency. It's a story about human freedom. It reminds us the systems we live in aren't inevitable. They're choices. And for the first time in a century, we have a new choice. A choice to build our future on a foundation that's solid, predictable, and within our own control. It's a choice for lower time preference, for a more prosperous and peaceful world. The journey begins with understanding, and that's a journey I truly hope you'll continue. We've explored the grand sweep of history and ideas in the Bitcoin Standard today, but this is just the beginning. A summary like this is like looking at a city map, but reading the book itself is like walking its streets, discovering hidden alleyways, and feeling its heartbeat. If these ideas sparked something in you, if you feel that pull of curiosity, I can't recommend enough that you pick up a copy. The real insights, the ones that anchor in your mind and change how you think, are waiting in its pages. The link is in the description. And if this exploration brought you value today, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button. We dive into powerful books like this every week, unpacking wisdom that can help us build better lives. Let's keep learning and growing together.